Okay, welcome to hopefully a very interesting evening. I've been really looking forward to this particular session tonight with the ISTE Interactive Video Conferencing Professional Learning Network. What a mouthful, the IVC PLN. We are going to have a bit of an interesting evening. Now, by the way, it's not evening for everyone. I'm currently in Sydney, Australia. My name's Ben from Physics Education. I've been heavily involved with the IVC PLN for several years, and I've been really looking forward to this particular session. Now, what you're in for is adapting virtual experiences for the blind, which is going to be a really interesting program considering what this year has been like. Now, we've been really lucky to have two amazing people who'll be able to help us out with what you can do in your classroom about this. So we have Stephanie McMahon. She is from the Space Center of Houston. She is an accessibility and inclusion specialist. Really cool to have her along. And also we've got Emily Gibbs. She is from the National Federation of the Blind in Texas. And I must say, I am really looking forward to it. So Stephanie and Emily, please take the floor. Let us know what you've been getting up to.
Thank you, Ben. So welcome again to Adapting Virtual Experiences for the Blind. Yes, you can. We put that in there because a lot of folks at the beginning of the pandemic, they were like, what are we going to do if somebody is blind? They can't see. How are we possibly going to help them? And we found that it's not as difficult as you might be afraid. So this presentation tonight, we've got a lot of things we're going to cover. Emily, if you want to go ahead. Yeah, so our learning objectives for tonight, a bunch of best practices. So best practices in interacting with people who are blind or have low vision. So just in general, these are always good. Best practices for creating slides, how to describe images in a meaningful way. We'll go over that one a lot. The importance of focus when you're creating these, and the magic of storytelling. So a brief moment, and I can't forget the power of authentic audio, of course. So quick introductions. Again, my name is Stephanie McMahon, just like the picture here of pro wrestler Stephanie McMahon. Oh, actually, no, that is not me. In fact, this is me. This is a picture of me holding a model of a space shuttle. We have a guest at Space Center Houston. He is blind and he is exploring the model to learn more about it. So I am the Accessibility Inclusion Specialist here. I'm a NASA Equal Employment Opportunity Medal recipient. I'm a certified autism specialist and the proud mom of an adult child on the autism spectrum, and a certified teacher, EC312 SPED, EC312 English Second Language, and EC34 Generalist. And with me tonight again is Emily Gibbs, my good friend from the National Federation of the Blind, Texas.
So I'm Emily Gibbs. No relation. I get asked that all the time if you're familiar with the show NCIS. This is me. I am the Director of Youth and Education Services for the National Federation of the Blind of Texas. I am also a certified teacher. I'm certified in EC through 12 special education and EC through 12 teacher of students with visual impairments, and EC through 8 generalist. So now we want to hear about your concerns and what you are most concerned with when presenting or working with learners who are low vision or blindness. And so if you could take a minute to put it in the chat box or to put it in the question and answer box, we would love to hear from you, because we know that working with this population, it can be intimidating, especially if you don't have any experience.
Surely we have some concerns or questions. Just take a moment, type them up. Here we go. Oh, we're afraid that the quality might be less or terrible. And somebody else is saying they want to make sure when we add alt text, the descriptions are helpful. Yes, thank you for using alt text. Don't know what people really need. Oh, flowering plants in a garden, share the beauty of flowers. Oh, I think we can kind of cover that, but let's make sure we do. Text large enough with the right contrasting colors, get all the info on the screen. Sounds like you guys already have some good insights.
These are great concerns because it really shows that you're already thinking about how to make your program inclusive.
Agreed. See if we're missing anything else in the chat.
You want to go on?
Let's go on. I think this looks really good. I think we can help you with all of these. If we don't come up with your question, be sure to ask us later.
Absolutely. So here are some just general best practices for working with this population. We should always treat blind learners as more similar than different than their sighted peers, because our blind learners are, you'll find when you're working with this population, they generally are more similar than different. Sometimes you do have to make adaptations in order to be inclusive, but they're really just like everybody else. They're just like their sighted peers. One really good tip is to let the learner know that you're approaching or leaving. So whenever you're coming in, coming up to them, you might say, hi, this is Emily. I'm here to work with you. Or I might say, this is Emily again. I need to step away. I need to go out and get some materials. I'll be right back. Often people who are totally blind don't know if someone walks away, and it can be embarrassing or off-putting if they keep talking when they're not there. Always identify yourself by name. It's important, so they know who's talking. And it's kind of unreasonable and rude to expect everyone to learn your voice, because sometimes blind learners can't memorize people's voices, even though stereotypically that's kind of one thing that everybody thinks, that they should know and be able to recognize people, but sometimes they can't. And always use the learner's name too, because again, a lot of that direction or in a classroom is by eye contact, and they're not going to be able to get that. And so they're not going to know if you're talking to them. And always, always ask before providing physical assistance. This is so important because it's all about consent. And often learners who are blind, they don't know that you're about to touch them, and it can be kind of shocking. And so you always want to make sure that it's okay. May I, put my hand on your shoulder? Do you need help, coming up to the front of the room? Would you like to take my arm? The other thing I always suggest is, instead of reaching and grabbing their hands, you always want to, when you ask, is it okay if I show you something? You want to put your hand under their hand. It's called hand under hand technique, and it's much, much gentler. And so you always want to offer, when you're offering to show someone that, you always want to take their hand and then guide them that way. And so you're not grabbing the top of their hand.
Emily, this is Stephanie. You mentioned treating blind learners as more similar than different. One of the things that, like in this picture, we've got 3 young learners here of different various levels of acuity, of visual acuity at a Space Center University program. This one is adapted for people who are blind. They're doing the same exact experiment that their sighted peers would be doing with, they're measuring for a robotics course. They're measuring to input stuff, but they're using a measuring tape that talks. So we're just adding an extra tool. We're not adding any type of different program. It's the same program, just adapted.
Mm-hmm. So someone asked, if we have a panel of people talking on screen, do I suggest that each person say their name each time they talk? If you have a limited panel and you are introducing them at the beginning, it shouldn't be a problem. So I wouldn't have to say that name every single time. But if you're in a chaotic classroom and people are coming and going, and then yes, I would suggest the first time ever you go up and talk to them, every time you remind them, this is Emily again. You don't have to do it every time during the day, but definitely at the beginning of each day, remind them who you are and what your purpose is. Any other questions about general best practices? Okay, here are some more. Definitely don't stress over using the words like look and see. They're used in general conversation, and there's really no reason to, try to talk your way around them. But definitely do avoid using the terms blind or visually impaired unless you know how the learner identifies, because there is that self-identification piece. You don't know whether the person thinks of themselves as blind or thinks of themselves as visually impaired. So you should probably just not mention it at all, because both of you know that they are blind or visually impaired, so you don't need to talk about it. Verbalize your actions. And so if you want to, especially if you're up in the front of the room or you're presenting or you You have something, you might say, I'm going to go over to the table and get the book so we can, get to work here. So just talk about what you're doing. If you're writing something on the board, read what you're writing while you're writing it. And that way everyone knows what's going on. Definitely use sound localization to direct. So instead of saying, the drinking fountain is over there, you could say, the drinking fountain is right next to the bathroom and you can hear the water running. And remind people to use both hands when examining something, because blind and visually impaired learners are often told don't touch, and so they become accustomed to not being able to look at things. And so sometimes when even that becomes an option, they're very hesitant about it. Oops, I skipped one.
Emily,
Okay.
Lori has a question. This might be a good one to stop for a moment. Interested in knowing how to develop materials when I'm not physically in the room with the learners, or provide guidance to educators who will be there. And I think that might be more in your wheelhouse. This is kind of what you get to do every day.
Oh, so that's a tough one, especially in this new world where we're Zooming all the time. When I'm doing my distance learning programs now, I have been trying to put together boxes or packets and mail them to people. And so when I know I'm going to do a lesson, I box up everything that the lesson needs and I mail it off beforehand. So they have everything that's required, especially because I often don't know what is going to be in the house. And so I don't know if they have, in my case, like a Braille writer or Braille paper, or even sometimes crayons. And so I try to make sure that all of the required materials are prepared and sent. As for stuff that's already in a house, if I didn't have the ability to send anything, and especially working with blind or visually impaired people, I would make sure that they're trying to teach, they would need like an aide or maybe a parent there to help them. And then I would suggest sending a list of materials ahead of time if you can't mail anything. That way they have time to gather things like crayons or a tactile backboard, maybe sandpaper in order to make the crayons tactile. I have a whole list of things. If I knew the lesson, I would absolutely be able to help plan some materials to make it more accessible. And my email will be at the end of this. If you actually do have, this kind of situation where you need help, I'd be happy to consult with you and figure out exactly what kind of materials you might need. But it's definitely doable.
Thank you. That was a great question. And Lori says she'll follow up. So the next section is actually about engaging learners virtually. So the picture here is one of our part-time instructors doing a presentation for a National Federation of the Blind. We were very fortunate they had their national convention, and Stephen here is presenting, doing a virtual tour and also a virtual program with their kiddos. And Emily, I'll let you kind of talk about some of the best practices for that.
Well, I think that when we had planned this, we were still thinking that we were going to have an in-person convention. And, about halfway through, we just realized that we were going to have a virtual convention. And I said to Stephanie, we still want to do tours of Space Shuttle Center Houston. So we need to figure out a way to do virtual tours of a physical environment for blind people. And Stephanie didn't hang up on me. And so it was a really fantastic experience to come up with ways to describe the pictures, ways to describe the areas and tell stories about the different areas of NASA and make it really very inclusive that way in order to make it interesting and to make it engaging. And Stephen did an amazing job. So these are some best practices for slides. I know we had talked about this a little bit. There was a question about what to do for slides and how to get all your information on. So most important is a sans serif font. That's a font that doesn't have the lines on the edges, because those are easier to read and clearer for people who don't see as well. Preferential seating. And so preferential seating is A lot of people think it's sitting at the front, but it doesn't have to be. Really, you want to give everyone the ability to sit where they need to sit, because depending on a person's vision, they might need to sit better on the right side. If they have a very narrow field of view, actually sitting in the back might be better because it provides a much wider area. So we don't know necessarily what their vision is. So we want to give them the opportunity to sit wherever they need to. I know someone else asked about how do you get all of the text that you need on each slide. Really, if you need to have a lot of text, you want to break it up into several different slides, because you do want to have limited text on each slide so it's available, so everyone can read it. High color contrast is important too. White and black, or yellow and black, or yellow and black is actually really good because it reduces the glare, and glare can be a problem. If you notice, we're animating the line appearances, so that kind of draws attention to each line and makes it so your eye is drawn to it. And high definition photos, you want really clear, crisp photos that can be blown up, especially if they're using an iPad, so you can pinch zoom and get them really, really big. Just waiting a second to see if any questions pop up. All right, so describing images. As you can see here, this is a gentleman who is blind, and he's looking at the Mona Lisa. And so how would you describe the beauty of that painting so he can experience it? Obviously, he's looking at it with his hands in order to get kind of the overview right now. So this is a challenge we wanted you all to kind of partake in using the question and answer box. We'd like you to write a description about this photo for a learner who's blind, and we have a timer here. So do you want to do the whole 2 minutes, Stephanie?
Well, let's start it and we'll see how people go.
Yep. Go ahead and take a minute and write quickly up in the question and answer box how you would describe this. All right. You want me to stop it and go on, Stephanie?
We've got 34 seconds left.
Okay.
30 seconds. Y'all get your answers in. We have a few.
Here we
10
go.
seconds.
There we go. Some people are taking a stab at it. Thank you very much. So Mariella says 2 astronauts in suits working on a NASA machine outside. Background is red, orange hues in the background. And Alyssa says 2 astronauts in spacesuits on either side of a rover. The rover's on a red surface of reddish color, and it has a grabber on the surface. So that's great. We love to do this this activity because it really kind of illustrates how difficult it is to describe a picture sometimes.
We have a lot of different words too. We've got people talking about spacesuits. We've got people talking about planetary bodies, different colors, foregrounds, robotic device, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of different answers. And that's really the point.
Right. But the most important thing when you're thinking about describing an image is what is the most important part? What are you trying to convey? A lot of times when you're looking for describing an image, you want to know what are you doing this for? Like, what is the purpose of describing this image? Are we doing a lesson on rovers? Are we doing a lesson on astronauts? And so you really want to know why you're describing this image. So
I see one person put the, go ahead.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just saying, I see one person has already put that the front left wheel of the rover is busted. Is that the most important thing in this photo? Maybe.
Well, and it's important to note that nobody else mentioned that. And so that's getting more information from the picture than we had before. So here's an example of, it's a photo of Louisville, Kentucky. And so you can see there's a very short description where it doesn't really, give a lot of flowery words. It just kind of describes the picture. Color photo at dusk across a wide river with a bridge, lit skyscrapers beyond, and the river reflects the purple of the sky. And so it's a very kind of to the point description that gets it across, what the picture is of. Or depending on what the reason for your description is, you can have a longer description. A color photo and portrait orientation of the skyline of a modern city at dusk, shot from across a wide expanse of river. Crossing the river, an angle in the photo is a cable-stayed bridge in front of a tall city skyscrapers lit up. The river reflects a purple streaked sky along with the lights of the cars driving along the riverbanks and the lights of the skyscrapers. The photo evokes the contrasting themes of the natural beauty of the sunset and the artificial beauty of a modern city. And so both descriptions are equally accurate, but they both have different reasons behind them.
So I guess the short answer to the question about alt text, oops, go back one.
I'm going to, if I can.
The short answer about the question about alt text is that it really depends on what you think is the most important part. Why do you have that picture on there? And if the most important thing with that picture on Mars was that there's a busted wheel, then that's what you really describe. If it's more about a spacesuit, you describe the spacesuit. But you don't have to describe everything on the page. Really quick, funny story. I was actually at a convention type thing for the blind. It wasn't National Federation of the Blind. And they had somebody describing everybody who came on the screen and what they were wearing and their color, the color of their hair. And one of my friends who is blind said, I don't care what color his shirt is. It is completely irrelevant to me. But what is important is sound. So whenever we can use sound, it can really make a difference. And it might be music to help set the tone. It might be something that is an authentic piece of history or something having to do with your lesson. So for instance, who could ever forget this iconic sound?
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Gives me all the chills, that incredible moment. So when you can add that authentic audio, it can make a huge difference. Or the power and majesty of a space shuttle launch. You can almost feel it. Turn up your volume if you like to feel the rumble. Feel that thrust, all that power and that motion. The other thing is in astronomy. So in astronomy, we have different telescopes that are very rarely taking actual visual pictures. Usually we're using parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that are invisible to the naked eye. In this case, I'm talking about Kepler, and it is taking a reading from the star KIC, blah, 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 blah. And this is what it sounds like. Kind of eerie. When you add these authentic moments in, it can really change everything. And I'm going to pause just a moment because we had a good question. Or actually a comment about closed captioning. And I agree, it should be turned on. Again, I'm not sure, you should have that be able to toggle on and off the closed captioning, but yes, every presentation should have that ability. So we're going to talk a little bit about interpretive presentations and how this all comes together. You're probably already doing these things in your classrooms, but you want to make sure as you're putting them together, you're thinking on these things. Again, focus your talking points to tell your message. We don't have to say everything about everything having to do with a telescope or a mission. You want to add that authentic audio whenever you have it. It is okay to use videos as long as it has great audio and we describe the settings of the video so a person who cannot see it can understand what's happening. And never forget the power of social emotional connections, especially for somebody, maybe they've never seen an airplane before. So anything you can connect it to that feels similar, riding in a car or being in a van, that is more likely to connect with that person in their everyday life. And I'm going to give you an example of something from that presentation we did with the National Federation of the Blind. So this photo of a cube-shaped air filter crisscrossed in duct tape, it might not seem like much, but it has a rather dramatic history. Like the hint of plastic and tubing barely noticeable in the photo, there's far more to this artifact than one would think. I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you are on a long road trip in a pickup truck hauling a camping trailer. You've been cruising along with two of your coworkers for 56 hours when you are asked to turn up the radio. But as soon as you do, something kind of unexpected happens. All right, now I want you to flash back. It's April 14th, 1970. 3 astronauts are on their way to the moon. This was NASA's 7th crewed lunar mission and with the unlucky name of Apollo 13. 56 hours into the mission, the Capcom asked them to stir the cryo tanks, which is really a routine request, on par with asking somebody to turn up the radio on your truck. But what happened next was anything but routine. There was an explosion that rocked the spacecraft, blowing the side off the service module. Oxygen and debris were vented out into the emptiness of space. But in the understated manner of the crew, they radioed mission control.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main beam plus undervolt.
Roger, main B undervolt. Okay, stand by, 13. We're looking at it.
Within about 3 hours, all the oxygen stores were lost, along with the water, electrical power, use of the propulsion system. How are they going to survive and be able to safely return to Earth? Well, Mission Control scrambled to come up with a solution, but thankfully, the spacecraft was designed with 3 parts. We had the command module, the service module that blew up, and the lunar module. But the lunar module is in great shape and could be used as a lifeboat. So the astronauts moved out of the command module and into the lunar module, kind of like you moving from your camping trailer, into the camping trailer from your pickup truck. So this is great, our astronauts are saved. But were they? Yet another problem is soon discovered. Imagine now that you're in mission control. You're surrounded by readout monitors, cigarette smoke, and men in button-down shirts with the pocket protectors. You know, somebody really ought to make a movie out of this.
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the lunar module,
5 filters on the limb.
which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doc,
You're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
they take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It just isn't a contingency we've remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole.
What followed next is a testament to the great ingenuity of the NASA team. Engineers on the ground used the manifest, which is kind of like your camping checklist of the items you pack, to find out what the astronauts would have available on board. After all, there is no Walmart in space. So the engineers came up with a solution involving a piece of cardboard, rubber tubing from a spacesuit, a plastic bag, a sock, which we hope was clean, and duct tape, which we never leave Earth without. The radios gave the design to the Capcom, who called it up via radio to Apollo 13. Guys, there was no Zoom meetings back then. So the astronauts then listened carefully and had to reconstruct the design in 0 gravity because, as they say, failure is not an option. So just a little example, and this kind of ties in nicely to our Space Exploration Educators Conference, a shameless plug for our 27th annual conference, which will be February 4th through 6th. It is completely virtual. And at this, Emily and I are going to actually do a whole lot more with this topic, including some classroom activities and how this could all tie in. Woohoo, we already got some people signed up for Seek. There is a link at the bottom of the screen, which you're welcome to go to, or you can ask Emily or me or Ann or anybody how to get hooked up with Seek if you're interested. But at this time, if you have any questions, Emily and I are happy to take them. And Emily, you go and put up our contact information so people can do that.
Absolutely. And so if you have any questions about accessibility or how you can do your program with the materials that you have at home, please feel free to email me or call me. I'm available.
Or if you want to do some type of virtual tour with Space Center Houston, hey, happy to do that as well. I don't know, Kelly, if we answered your question about sharing the beauty of flowering plants, but I think you can probably get a hint. We're going to talk about how it smells, how it feels, how you can tie it into experiences that maybe the students have had. Beauty is so much more than just what we see.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see, what else do we've got in the chat? Questions? Yes, we absolutely need duct tape in every toolbox. Thank you, Marlies. So many ideas. You're very welcome. I know our time is just about up, but if anybody, again, you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. We love what we do. We love sharing with people and helping you guys out. Oh, thank you. Marlies has added the link so everybody can click on that.
Thank you all for coming.
Well done. Hey, thank you very much for putting this on, Stephanie and Emily. This is really cool. It actually got me thinking about the idea of trying to emulate what was done with Apollo 13, trying to describe an activity virtually to get someone to assemble virtually. Imagine doing it with the cameras off.
Yes.
That to me would be really interesting in a way to sort of get your head around what it's like to be a learner in this situation. So look, this is really, really cool. And look, again, we'll have this hanging on for a couple more minutes just in case we have a few people with some questions. But otherwise, if you want to run away and you want to check this out another time, we are recording this. And what we'll do is we will post this on the ISTE IVC PLN. A link off to a YouTube page. Yes, we have a YouTube page. You can just type in ISTE IVC PLN. And I'll have to go find the link because, of course, I just thought of it just then. But we will get this out, and you definitely will get to check this out. In the meantime, please feel free to reach out to Emily or Stephanie. You can see the contact there. Take a photo of it. Take a screen capture. You'll be able to always look at this later. Any last words, Stephanie or Emily?
I don't think so.
Yeah, thank you all for being here and for being open to being accessible to everybody. Our blind learners are just as capable of learning. We just need to present in a slightly different way.
100%. Thank you much. And I will just do a quick shout out. Yes, I know Kelly. Hello, Kelly. She said hello to me before. Yes. All right, good. But much appreciated. Have a fantastic end of year, everyone. And I hope we have a better year next year. And I'm sure
Absolutely.
we will. All right. See you later, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight and this morning and midday and anywhere else you might be around the world. See you later.